Assalamu alaikum. Okay, so today I've been asked by several people to provide some basic information that you would need to have on a home education report in order for it to be accepted by the local authority. The local authority is asking for these more and more, which is a yearly review sort of idea of what your home education provision looks like. Your home education provision obviously varies from family to family, from child to child, even within the same household, but you can give a basic overview of all of the things that you require. The main thing they're going to need from you at the beginning is correct student information. So if you receive a letter and it has your child's information on it, sometimes the way the information is gathered, especially if the child has never been into an institution, such as school or nursery, sometimes the date of birth information and the other information they've collected are incorrect. The best thing for you to do is to correct them. So make sure you correct the spelling of any names, their age and date of birth. As you correct their name, age, date of birth, the important part is that you understand then what is your geographical location. So probably your address. These are basic information things that should be correct. If they are not correct, problems may arise later. Then we need a general overview. And when I say general overview, I mean sort of the idea of what textbooks you are using, if any. You don't have to use textbooks, but this is just the general idea of what's going on. Any online resources that you are using. Any specialized programs. So if your child needs TIV and for IDEA, they may need touch type software. Or if your child is suffering from dyslexia or dyspraxia for anything that may be considered an aid to their learning. You do not have to say how you are financing this, because that's a question I've been asked before. Any other instructional materials, so your reference books, for instance. These are all good things for you to have in your arsenal to be able to deal with this. You also need to consider what are your current learning objectives. These change every year, obviously. So learning objectives and keep them current. Don't be very vague about this. You've sort of got to be detailed to sort of stop any comeback on this. But this is where we are dealing with the section of the British law that says it needs to be up to their aptitude and ability. So it's not going to be the same for the 7-year-old who lives down the road that's also academically very gifted. If your child is working at standardized levels, that's not going to be an issue, but you have to sort of explain yourself. So this is the point where you talk about your child's academic standards. If you are looking at academic standards, make sure you include any disabilities or extra needs that your child may have. And then how are you tailoring their content to their education? So this is where we get into tailored education, also known as personalized education. What the LEA is really looking for, so your local education authority, what they are looking for is how you are going to assess progress. This does not and is not limited to testing. Testing is not your only way. It could be that you have a child do a piece of written work at the beginning of the academic year, and then you have them do it again, and that idea is a repeat. You could also be keeping track of things such as like spellings or how they have developed in ice skating, for instance. All of these things are progress checking because you may not have any formal ideas. So when it says progress checking, I always like to think about the idea that we take a lot of photos of our children. So you don't necessarily need to send these photos in, but you can use the photos to sort of jog your memory about how they started out a project and then how it ended. Not necessarily that it's ended, that you won't be going back, but it's sort of like how it's at the point in which you are writing this. If you are using a curriculum that has standardized testing in it, or points in which testing is available, something like Schofield and Sims, for instance, you have the standardized test scores. Sorry, I guess. Let's rub that out. Standardized test scores that you can include. That's only if that's applicable. You could also, if you have tutors, ask them for a small evaluation. That also doesn't have to be written. That could be a conversation that you have with them, and then they are able to give you some feedback on how your child is progressing. And then you can have the idea of general assessments that you carry out personally. You've then got to look at what are their educational activities. And when we're looking at activities, the main thing we're looking at here is the aspect that we all get asked about, and it's the idea of socialization. How is your child socialized? What are they doing? So these will come under the idea of trips, experiments, which you could do in a group. Do they attend a co-op? So we've got cooperatives here, extracurricular activities. Feel free to take screenshots as you wish, or you could just take a screenshot at the end of each particular board. So extracurricular activities and all of these that are related to they say that it has to be related to their learning, but we all know as home educators, all of the learning is learning. So we can look at the idea of their learning environment. And this is one that's been coming up a lot recently, is some local authorities have been asking you, does your child have a dedicated learning space? Meaning somewhere where they can do their work. Not all home educators have that dining room sort of setup of education. So it could be that they have a desk and chair, or it could be that they have their laptop for investigations and online lessons. And we're talking internet as well. The idea of internet access is sometimes quite crucial in this. Do we have to make any special accommodations? And I'll go further into detail on these things at a later date. So special accommodations or modifications. If your child has autism, for instance, how do you adapt the curriculum to meet their needs, the curriculum that you may be using? So what modifications have you made to their educational program? Are you taking them are you including their physiotherapy as part of their program? Are you including attending a specialist autistic group as part of their contract? And this is where this idea of individualized education becomes very paramount. So you've got this notion of individualized educational programs. So going back up here, so such as, do they have touch type? If the child suffers with hearing loss or lack of hearing altogether, are you using different resources for them than you would do for their siblings? Do you have a support system or support service? And the home educating community is very good at this sort of stuff. It's not necessarily, you may not need to access a service, but you may be able to group yourself with another set of parents who also have these same sorts of issues per se. And it's the idea of parental involvement. How much are you necessarily guiding their education, or are they doing it themselves? So this is where we talk about the education philosophy of what you are doing. So are we unschooling? Are we radically unschooling? Are we studying under the idea of Steiner? Is it Steiner influence? If it's Steiner influenced, what's the details on that? If it's Montessori influenced, what's the details on that? We may also have an element where you have a child who is attending some sort of provision, but it's not what we would call our standard school. It could be a small tuition center, for instance. But make sure your tuition center has the correct regulations for safeguarding in place before, obviously, that's an issue. And then the final thing is their future goals and plans. We know that our children's careers change by the day, but you find that home educating children, when they get to a certain age, have an idea of what they want to transition into. So are they going into an educational setting? Are you sending them to a 14 to 16 provision, for instance? Will they be attending that full-time, part-time? Is it interest-based, and will they be sitting exams there? If they're sitting exams at all, would they be pursuing further studies? If your child is pursuing further studies, where would they most likely do that? Are they looking to go to university, or are they looking to enter the workforce? These are the things that you need to have in the idea of a comprehensive home education report back. It needs to be an overview of what the student's learning journey and also possibly their accomplishments look like. So if you've got a child who is a gifted dancer, for instance, say, let's take a formalized idea of ballet. If they are taking ballet examinations, include that here. If they are doing Quran and they have passed a Quran competition, include it in here. You can include it here also. So the idea of progress and assessment, what's their recollection like? What kind of conversations are you having with them? And how much further are you willing to take those conversations, and how can it help you? I really hope this helps. I will be going into further detail on each one in the next couple of weeks. But being a home ed mom, I can't guarantee on time here. So this is Dr. Rachel Sarah Lewis signing out. Assalamu alaikum.